Hi there. Welcome to the Leading Forward podcast, one of the resources of Future Forward Consulting. You are listening to Matt and Pawan. I'm Matt. I have a Master's of Science in Strategic Leadership, and I'm a certified project management professional.
Hi, I'm Pawan. I have a Master's in Material Science and Engineering, and I've held leadership roles in semiconductor and hard drive industries.
We are everyday people trying to make the world a better place through our experience and knowledge of leadership and business concepts. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. You can find new episodes every other week on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. You can also check out our book, The Journey to Exceptional Leadership, available through Amazon. And also make sure you check out my consulting website, future-forward-consulting.com. While you're there, check out the Leadership Circle in the resources section. We have free Zoom meetings every month. Welcome to Episode 2 of our podcast, the Leading Forward podcast. Today we're going to talk about 3 pillars of leadership. You know, everybody who talks about leadership has a thing. And our thing is that leadership is built on 3 main pillars. And those pillars are trust and communication, which we talked about in the last episode. And then I held off on the cliffhanger. And the cliffhanger is the 3rd pillar, which is emotional intelligence. And as it turns out, emotional intelligence is probably the most important thing that you can work on to be a good, if not great, leader. So let's talk about these 3 pillars. We'll start with trust. Trust is the belief and confidence that team members have in their leaders, in knowing that they're reliable, they act with integrity, and make decisions with the best interests of the employees in mind. So a trusted leader keeps their promises, they admit their mistakes, and they communicate openly. So for an example, if a leader says they're going to consider employee suggestions and they follow through, then that is going to be a first step in the leader being trusted. You have anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, in every space I've worked in, trust is one of the biggest challenges, especially working in competitive environments, high technology places, and a lot of research organizations. Building the trust as a leader is a very critical piece of building a really good team. It enables people to be competitive, but also at the same time challenge each other. One thing that most times people miss is it's just not building a trust between a leader and the people they are leading, but also ensuring that there is enough trust between the people that are in their own organization to ensure that there is good communication, there is somebody that are picking up the slack for somebody else, identifying and actually leaning on them for help versus just being competitive against each other.
So let me ask you something. You know, I think everybody wants to work in an environment where there is trust. I mean, I think we've all worked in environments where there wasn't trust. Do you have any stories that you want to share about an environment you may have worked in that had no trust or little trust?
Yes. I mean, as much as I hate to say it, research environments are atrocious for behaviors like this. People tend to keep their ideas or their thoughts pretty close to their chest. They tend not to share them because they don't know how it would be used or how the outcome would be of them sharing information. It tends to weaken the team as a whole. It slows down progress. I've worked in a place where everybody worked as a single unit. It was not that it was a team. Everybody was doing their own thing. So as a leader, the struggle for that organization's lead was to build all these ideas into one cohesive story. And we struggled and we almost came close to failure because of that lack of trust. Now, luckily, it was the pressure of delivery that ensured that we all worked together as a team. But if not checked properly, it could have been catastrophic. Now, there was nothing anybody did in a wrong way. It was just how that environment was. Nobody trusted each other. Everybody is worried about what would come out of their mouth that somebody else is going to use as a patent. So everybody was trying to compete to get the first best thing out and have their name to it. And versus looking and trusting to say, this is my team, these are my people. Everybody was looking out to build their own profiles.
And so what could your leader have done to make things better?
I think one of the biggest things that would have helped, and I'm pretty sure you're going to touch upon, is helping them communicate better, talk to each other, ensure that they were communicating with each other. Because a lot of times what happens is we tend to be in our own world while executing on things, and everybody has different quirks, everybody has different ways of communicating, and sometimes it comes off as brash or sometimes it comes off as arrogant. But communicating to understand everybody's pros and cons of their personalities helps to slowly start trusting them, to say, I understand why this individual is communicating in a certain way, comes from a good place. I can still trust and work with them. It was not well established that we were all expected to work with each other versus we were all pitted against each other. So as a leader, I would have appreciated that particular leader to break down those walls that we built around us and said, you're all on the same piece. You all have to figure out and find a way to trust each other, right? And there were a lot of instances where this particular leader would say something, and would turn around and do something else. Or you got in trouble for trying a risky thing that was already blessed to try, and we all started getting a little gun shy on the outcome of what would happen, or angering the gods, for lack of a better word. So with the loss of trust came further deterioration of communication. So I think it would have helped if the leader had stepped in and said, you are all part of a team. And if the leader had actually executed to what was promised, we would have actually trusted them a little more to keep doing what we were doing to succeed.
So I was in a situation that you and I have talked about it before. I don't think I mentioned it on the podcast, but I was brought on board kind of as the golden child of a proposal team, and it really put me in a bad spot because nobody trusted me, because our boss didn't do anything to establish trust. He came on board, and one of the first things he did was brought me on board. And then he and I sat down and had a conversation. We came out of the meeting, and he proceeded to tell everybody, okay, this is how me and Matt are going to do this. So it was really, really awkward, and it took me a lot of time to build that trust back. So what I ended up doing was I put myself in a situation where I would help them, the other proposal managers, with their projects. I would help them put information in libraries that made it easier to access that information for future proposals, and sit down and talk with them and try to make sure they knew that I wasn't the bad guy. Yeah, so in that situation, it would have been better if our leader had really sat everybody down and listened to everybody's opinions rather than just listening to my opinions and saying, this is what we're going to do from here on out.
And the amount of alienation that comes from building somebody up's reputation before they come in frays the trust even more. One way it has helped me in the past is when I walk in, I know I can figure out a solution to a problem, but I would make myself vulnerable and reach out for help instead of trying to struggle by myself. And reaching out for that help, that little olive branch actually goes a long way, where they tend to realize the guy's smart, but he's reaching out for help. I'm getting to contribute to the success of whatever is being worked on. And slowly over time, those get mended over. But that alienation is something that I worry about with every new job I come into, because you have a certain reputation that follows you, and you worry it's going to set you apart where they don't look at you as a part of the team.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. All right, well, that kind of covers the trust. I think everybody's got a decent idea of what trust is. Now they have some examples from our experience. Let's talk a little bit about communications. So communications keep teams up to date. They keep things transparent. It's the process of effectively conveying information, vision, strategies to inspire, guide, and influence teams. And this includes verbal, nonverbal, and written skills. So it's up to the leader to clearly share vision and plans so others understand the goals of the team. An example of this would be a manager telling the team steps that are necessary to complete a project and why it matters.
Communication is one of those things where it's the most important, everybody recognizes it's most important, but nobody ever puts enough effort into it. I've struggled with lack of communication with my leadership structure almost everywhere except for the last 6 or 7 years, I would say. You have leaders that don't really believe in vision and mission. What they think is corporate has a vision and a mission. That is my vision and my vision. And that actually makes the communications worse, because as an individual contributor or somebody much farther down on the totem pole, you don't know what part of your work is contributing to the success. You tend to start becoming more and more distanced from the reality of how your work actually benefits the company. As we've gone through, one of the biggest pieces where we've lagged in communication is what is happening with the company. What is my team doing? What as a team do we do for the company? And where do we fit into the big picture as an organization? Lack of that communication has created a lot of disengagement, a lot of unnecessary workloads where people just stop caring anymore, because I don't know what I do. I'm just going to clock in, clock out, do my job, go home, right? The biggest concern as far as communication, for an example goes, we've had to execute something. It was on a very tight deadline. Now, this leader that we were working for had a good intent in mind of not putting that extra pressure on us and never communicated the criticality of the project, the timeline it was required to complete in. And we all worked in our own pace that we typically do. Lo and behold, the quarter ends, come to realize this was something that was critical for the business. We had to finish it. Now, the intent was right of not unloading that pressure onto us, but a clarity in communication that said, this is critical, this is the timeline, go reconfigure your working schedules to make this happen. Now, that's where communication needs to be more clearer. People assume just telling what they hear as and when it happens is communication, but that can be dangerous too. As a leader, sometimes you have to play the role of a shock absorber. You have critical information, you have to parse it to communicate it to the right team members in the right format, which I think this leader tried to do. But again, it's also important to give the reality of things. That's the trust part we talked about, where they have to know that they can trust you when you say something, it is what it is. So people can work their own schedule and balance their work-life balance to execute on things for the business without creating a lot of chaos suddenly.
I was at a company where I had great communication with my boss, but their boss had very little communication, and it caused such a fragment in our organization. My team was really good at what we did, and under the guidance of our boss, we were able to accomplish a lot, but we weren't able to focus on the overall organizational strategy because that wasn't shared with us from my boss's boss. If we had that understanding, it would have been a lot easier for us to do the work for the organization. And in addition, we wouldn't have just gone off and done the things that we thought was right. Because I'm the kind of person where I'll go, if I'm not given proper direction, I'm going to go do what I think is right. And I will communicate that with my boss. I will say, actually the first thing I tell any boss I have is, I am here to make you look good. And I am going to make you look good by doing these things. It's at that point that the boss needs to say, wait, hold on, this is actually what we need to do. But if they don't say anything, then that tells me, okay, go do what you're going to do. And that has actually made me look like an outlier. And like I wasn't part of the program because I was running off doing my own thing, which 100% of the time I thought was the right thing to do.
So my dad always tells me this one line whenever I have a communication with him about work and the stresses of it. He would tell me, you could be an A player. You could be kicking ass, doing wonderful things for the organization. But if you fail to deliver the basics of what your job is and what your boss requires of you, you have not done what your boss requires. So you're still invalid as a data point for that particular organization. So communication is important. Like you said, you communicated it to your boss, but if they don't communicate back, again, there's a break in the communication there. One of the biggest things is either everybody is well communicating, trusting of each other, and things turn out really good, or it's all bad. Sometimes there are good lengths of chain where communication is good, there's enough trust, but like you said, one skip level up or two skip levels up, there's a break in that chain. Now, I think sometimes it's hard to fix up or fix down, but one of the parts of building trust is when you identify a break in communication somewhere up the chain or down the chain, to try and find a way, once you've identified it, to go fix it, right? And that builds trust. That tells the rest of the organization and the people looking inward to say, this person knows where it's broken, but is actively building to fix that. It's not going to fix overnight, but it's the intent that makes the change.
So, what do you think about over communicating?
So it can go both ways. Sometimes it can be really dangerous, right? Especially when you're in a chaotic situation or the company is not doing good and you're giving them more information that they can parse and digest, or you're giving them information that and not doing anything. Again, that's where your emotional intelligence piece is going to come in, where you're giving them all this communication, but you don't help them understand what they're feeling based on those decisions, or helping them really assimilate into the new plan that you've come up with. So communication's good, but if it's not backed up with one of the other pillars, it also can be disruptive. Too much communication with too little to do, it can be chaotic.
And one of the things that we're actually going to talk about in the next episode, which is going to be about bad leadership, is the inability to make a decision, indecisiveness. And sometimes if you have too much information, that can cause indecisiveness in yourself and other people. And like I said, we'll talk about it a little more, but that's definitely a bad thing as well.
But I'll plug in a shameless pitch here, but that's why we wrote the book. And the reality of the world is you are sometimes going to be thrown a lot of information and you have to make a decision. That's part of being a leader. There's a lot of tools that help you parse the right information, digest it the right way, and rely on your team to make the right calls. But end of the day, as a leader, making a decision is the most important thing. And I think there's a whole journey section in the book that addresses a lot of these concepts.
Right. Okay, so we've talked about trust and we've talked about communication. The big elephant in the corner of all leadership is emotional intelligence. You know, this is one of those things that we've talked about in the past about it being called a quote unquote soft skill. But yet it's probably the most important thing that you can do as a leader to help your organization be successful. And some of the things for emotional intelligence include checking in with your team, listening to your teammates, having empathy, and conflict management. So emotional intelligence, the definition is the ability to perceive, understand, manage, and use emotions in oneself and others, which includes self-awareness, self-regulation, motivation, and empathy. A leader can recognize feelings in order to lead better. So I've got two examples. If a team member is frustrated, the emotionally intelligent leader will notice it, listen, and help address the issue calmly without getting excited themselves. The second example is staying calm during a crisis, helping the team stay focused and motivated. So how about that? Do you have any examples about that?
I do, and it's a funny story. I think it came from a good place, but I used to work with this guy who was extremely calm, extremely stable. He understood how to process the information that's being thrown at him, how critical the work was, but he was like a Zen master. Downside of that is you could literally have a fire going on and he would still be a Zen master and it would get people fired up. They're like, dude, this needs to happen like today. Like, where are you with this? Right? But sometimes it's good to have that emotional intelligence. But like you just suggested, it's also important to regulate it, understand the environment, and communicate that you recognize it. The problem with him was, as much as he digested it really well, he never communicated that I understand your urgency. I recognize that this is urgent. I recognize that I need to get this done, and I'm on it. Right? That's why all these three pillars are so intertwined with each other. He never communicated out, and people used to just get freaked out just talking to this guy because they just assumed he didn't care. He actually cared a lot more than anybody else put together in the team.
So what could he have done better?
Communication. Building that trust with each other to say that I understand what it is, or building that trust bank with everybody that says he is a reliable person. I throw something at him, he's going to come back and deliver on me. So no matter what the urgency or how he reacts to it, he needs to build that trust around with the people around him. So that's where he lagged on, was people didn't know if he was going to flake on them, if he was going to do it, or if it was done. So he lagged a little bit on communicating that part and building the trust with his teammates.
So I have an example, and let me know if it rings any bells.
Okay.
There was a guy that I worked with who was he was smart. He was a really good engineer. He told everybody he had been a really good leader, and he was retired from the military. He was the first one in the mornings, and he was also the first one to leave, but he put his time in every day, and he put in a full day's work. He was somebody that a lot of people could look up to and try to learn stuff from. And he was really good with people, trying to teach them things along the way. But he was the biggest black cloud I think I've ever seen. So he was the kind of guy where in the morning I would come in and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And the first things out of his mouth would be, "Traffic sucked. I had a bad night of sleep last night. Things aren't going well with my wife." There was always a story or something. The thing that always cracked me up about him was he always bragged about being a leader, being, somebody that the military could count on, and yet he seemed to have zero emotional intelligence. In fact, it wasn't just that he was a black cloud. He would complain to everybody about everybody else. So he was actually a better drama queen than he was an emotionally intelligent leader.
That's what we miss, right? We assume that emotional intelligence is a concept that we just follow one time in a day or in a meeting or in a one-on-one with an employee. It's an everyday thing. Nobody wants to have a negative aspect around them all through their day. Work is hard enough. You don't need that stuff. Especially if you're a leader. I'm not saying you paint a rosy picture. Morale is one of the biggest things. You gotta keep it up. How do you do that? You start reading the room, which is a section we write in the book, and it works in different scenarios. Get a temperature of the room. How is everybody feeling? Who's doing what? And try and address things on an individual level and not on a group basis, because not everybody is going to be in the same mood. And you got to communicate with different people different day. Like you just said, maybe all these things happen to him, but it's important to recognize that maybe this individual is having a difficult day that particular day, and you got to ease off on them. Or somebody's having a lazy day and you need to motivate them and you go hard on them. So emotional intelligence is a 24/7 thing. And this is one of those skills that is not just a leadership trait. It's going to help you be successful in life in general. It helps you adjust to wherever, be good with the environment you're in, make friends, right? Some of them might be superficial relationships because they're too hard to manage, but at least it keeps the peace around. And it makes sure that you have a fulfilling day. On a day-to-day basis, I think this is one of the most important pillars as far as I go for leadership, and I'm pretty sure you agree on it.
Yeah.
Out of the 3 pillars, emotional intelligence is important.
Okay, so we talked about trust, communications, and emotional intelligence. How do we stitch those pillars together to make a cohesive leadership experience?
We'll come back and talk about it in a scenario that stitches it well. But
why don't we talk about that now?
Yeah, actually we could do that. Well, I have a pretty good example. The recent workplace where we've worked in, you had been there before me and you recognized the chaos of the environment.
There wasn't chaos.
Absolutely there was. And you identified the cross-section of people we were bringing in. A lot of people that were fresh out of school. There were seasoned professionals. There were a lot of leaders on site. There were technicians, there were operators. It was a mixed group of people, and you recognized that everybody needed some structure, a stability, something to look forward to that's going to put things in the right perspective for them to digest their work life as they were doing it every day. And you started the leadership circle. Now, on the outset, it looks like we should call it leadership 1.0 because we have 2.0 now. But on the onset, it just looks like a group of people put together in a room talking about just random concepts. But you were addressing it based on people and their emotions or what they were dealing with for the week. And you picked topics that delivered to stitching that story back to how it relates to them. You are building trust by being that individual they can rely on, being that individual that they can come up to and ask tough questions like, hey, my boss sucks. What do I do? Or, hey, this person doesn't talk.
I never heard that question.
Yeah, good luck with that. You keep convincing yourself on that. And then you had very good communication. You told them what to expect. You told them what it was going to be. And you let them freely speak their mind. And they got comfortable around it. As a leadership concept, as a leader, what you did there basically gave them a stable driftwood they can hold on to in very rough seas. I think in long term, it's going to go really long ways for a lot of people that were involved with the leadership circle.
All right. I don't know how to follow that up, to be honest. Yeah, that was...
You could talk about the thought process of how you tailored this around, or what your intent was, or what... Actually, I should ask you this. What were you expecting the outcome to be of this leadership circle when you started this?
When I started it, the idea was just to have leadership conversations with diverse groups of people. We had people, like you mentioned, who were leaders in the past. They were military leadership. There were people who were leaders in the organization before we came on board, and they were actually struggling. So I thought this would be a good opportunity for them to share ideas, for all of us to share ideas, and try and make the organization better as a result. So yeah, it definitely included that communication, having that regular communication with everybody and sharing the concepts of leadership that I've become so passionate about. It did include building that trust. It was important to me to build those relationships with people, mainly out of friendship, but beyond that, it became so important as I tried to do my job on a regular basis. People began to realize, like I said, this was also one of the organizations where I wasn't given a lot of guidance as to the organizational goals. And so I was kind of left up to my own devices. And so when I ran off doing the things that I thought were necessary in order to accomplish my job, a lot of times I had to work with people who were in these leadership circles, and it made it so much easier because we had that trust, we had the communication, and we shared that emotional intelligence. We opened up quite a bit in those meetings, and that was pretty rewarding, I think, for all of us.
Yeah, but it was definitely there. But I think with the additional amount of chaos we had, I think we should come back and recognize that your emotional intelligence quotient was pretty high, where you recognized a need for something like this. You followed that up with very thorough communication of the intent of why it was being done, how it benefits them, what to look forward to on a bi-weekly basis. And then you ended up also building trust with all these individuals that were coming in, because we had conversations in and out of those meetings where a lot of things were coming out of the woodwork that we did not recognize or were not clearly visible. But they felt it to be a safe enough environment to bring all that to bear and get a solution out of it and move forward. So I think back to what we started out with, emotional intelligence is a very strong pillar. I would say it's one of the biggest load-bearing pillars. But by itself, it doesn't do as much if you don't follow up with trust and communication like you have displayed with this recent example.
Yeah, so I don't know anything else we need to say about these three pillars. If we haven't expressed it now, the importance of the three pillars, especially emotional intelligence, I don't know what else to do. We're doing a podcast, so it's hard to beat people over the head.
But I think what we should recognize is these are hard concepts. These are not just catchy words. And I think there is enough information in the book for any new budding leader or a seasoned leader who is coming out of their comfort zone into a new organization to go find newer techniques, tools of the trade to rely on how better to communicate, how to build trust. With all these different generations of people coming into the workforce, that has changed. We've seen a lot of studies that have come out that suggest you can't manage people like how you managed them 40 years ago. It's just not a reasonable thing. I think it's important to let them know there's a resource. It's not as hard as we make it, but All of these three concepts actually help you do better in life in general. It's not just a leadership concept. That's why these are so important.
Right, right. I don't have anything more to add to that.
Absolutely. This is a good place to stop.
All right. Well, we talked about the three pillars of leadership, being trust, communication, emotional intelligence. We talked about what they were, what they mean. We gave examples, and I think we talked about them pretty much ad nauseum, at least for the two of us to have a conversation. So we will call it a day, and we appreciate everybody listening, and we'll talk to you next time. If you like this podcast, please subscribe. As we mentioned, it doesn't cost you anything. You can find new episodes every other week on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Music. You can also check out our book, The Journey to Exceptional Leadership, available through Amazon. And make sure you check out my consulting website, future-forward-consulting.com. Our leadership circles are every third Wednesday of the month. Check it out in the resources section of the website. Until next time, this has been Matt and Pawan on the Leading Forward podcast. We hope you learned something, and we'll catch you again next time.